Hello, everyone. I hope you're all cozy and comfortable because what I'm about to share will send chills down your spine. As the rain lashes against your windows and the lightning splits the night sky, we gather here in the virtual darkness to embark on a terrifying journey. I'm going to tell you 6 scary stories. Each one will be scarier than the one before. So sit tight, hold your breath, and let the stories unfold. When I was a college student, my parents found a small house for me to live in. It was a modest house, not too big or fancy, but I was happy with it. At first, everything seemed normal and peaceful, but strange things started happening after a few days. One rainy Saturday, I was sitting in the living room watching TV for hours. Suddenly, I heard a strange scraping sound on the floor. I looked around thinking maybe an animal had gotten inside, but I couldn't find anything, so I sat back down and continued watching TV. As the rain kept pouring outside, I heard a noise coming from the kitchen. Curiously, I grabbed a pillow to protect myself and went to check it out. To my surprise, right in the middle of the dark kitchen, there was a box of Cheerios on the floor, spilling out hundreds of tiny O's. I couldn't understand how it got there. It was a mystery. While I was cleaning up the spilled Cheerios, I heard a creaking sound, like someone stepping on a weak area of a wooden floor. It came from near the kitchen table, but when I looked, nobody was there. I started feeling a bit scared, thinking maybe my imagination was playing tricks on me. I finished cleaning and went back to watching TV, trying to ignore the strange happenings. The storm outside continued, and the thunder grew louder, but strangely it began to calm me down. It was like the sound of the rain and thunder was soothing my worries. I started to relax and enjoy the storm. However, my peaceful moment didn't last long. I must have dozed off because I woke up suddenly, feeling disoriented. Something had woken me up. It wasn't the TV. I sensed a thud or a bang coming from downstairs. It gave me a jolt of fear, and without thinking, I turned off the TV and hurried upstairs to my bedroom. The next day seemed normal, just like any other day, but it wasn't until the following gray, rainy day that the strange occurrences returned. I woke up feeling terrible, as if I had been drinking all night. My head was pounding, and I felt sicker than ever before. I couldn't move around much because the gloomy weather made me feel even worse, so I stayed in bed, leaving the TV on in the background for some company, with a garbage pail close by in case I needed to vomit. At midday, I muted the TV because I thought I heard sounds coming from above me. It was the attic. You see, the attic door was in my bedroom, and most of the attic was built right above it. I heard the noises not just once, but 3 or 4 times. Despite feeling sick, I summoned the courage to get out of bed. I pulled down the attic door and took an old baseball bat with me for protection. I climbed up the creaky steps, and as I reached the top, I turned on the light to illuminate the attic. There were a few old boxes left by the previous owner, but I couldn't see anything alive that could be making those noises. I quickly climbed back down, feeling scared of the mysterious attic. That night, I woke up to what I thought was thunder, but it wasn't. My sickness intensified, and the sound of a thud echoed from the attic once again. Fear gripped me as I pulled the string to the attic door, grabbed my baseball bat, and climbed up the stairs. I tried to make myself brave and screamed in the loudest, most intimidating voice I could muster. But just before I could turn on the light, a chilling sound cut through the darkness, the eerie giggle of a child. At that moment, I felt like I was weightless, as if my insides had dropped inside my body. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of fear that I can't even describe. Without thinking, I ran out of the house and into the cold rain. I called my dad, sobbing and telling him everything that had happened. My parents saw how frightened I was, and somehow they believed me. The next day, we packed up all my things and moved back home. To this day, I am convinced that what I experienced in that house was completely paranormal, beyond any logical explanation. In my cozy little room, right next to my bed, there stood a big storage closet. It wasn't like the regular doors you'd expect to see. It was different. This one had a huge square door without a knob. When you wanted to open it, you just had to grab it by the edges and it would come off. It was like magic. Let me take you back several years ago when I was just a curious 19-year-old. I remember the very first time something strange happened with that closet door. It was just an ordinary night. I went to sleep and woke up in the morning, only to find the door had been opened. It was leaning on the wooden edge of my bed. Now, this wasn't the first time it had happened, so I wasn't too shocked. After all, there were no hinges or anything holding the door in place. I simply pushed the door back into the wall and went about getting ready for school. The following night, as I lay in bed, I suddenly woke up around 4 o'clock in the morning. I could have sworn I heard a noise. I sat up and looked around my dark room, trying to make sense of it all. That's when I noticed it. The door was leaning on the edge of my bed once again. My heart skipped a beat. I was getting worried that the edges of the hole in the wall were starting to chip away, making the door fit less tightly. I decided to leave the door open overnight and fix it in the morning. But oh boy, that night turned out to be a sleepless one. I tossed and turned for at least 2 hours, trying desperately to fall back asleep. Just as I was starting to drift off, I heard a loud thump. I knew exactly what it was, even in the darkness. The door had fallen open once more. I was done with this strange occurrence. In that moment, frustration took over, and I mentally decided to leave the door open from then on. But then, something unexpected happened. I heard the faintest sound of a plastic bag rustling, and it was coming from inside the closet. My heart raced, and I swear it skipped a beat. There was no draft in the room at all. My curiosity mixed with fear, and I hesitantly flicked on the light switch, illuminating my room. I looked directly into the open closet, and what I saw sent shivers down my spine. My biggest fear came true. Someone was inside the closet, peering at me in my bed. It was as if time stood still. Within a mere half a second of me turning on the lights, the person tried to hide, as if I hadn't seen them. I was frozen with fear. I couldn't even move. All I could do was scream. I screamed so loud that it felt like my voice could reach the heavens above. It took what felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was maybe 10 seconds before my dad burst into my room. I pointed at the closet, my voice trembling, and he looked inside. Only then did I finally feel safe enough to get up and stand behind him. My dad, being the brave man that he is, crawled all the way into the closet, searching for anyone who might be hiding. But to our astonishment, he couldn't find a soul. He emerged from the closet and assured me that I must have been seeing things, just a trick of the mind. But deep down, I started to question that myself. Still, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in that room anymore. I ended up sleeping on the floor in my parents' room, wrapped tightly in a cozy blanket. Well, I wouldn't say I slept, because even before I could drift off, I heard something that made my heart skip a beat once again. It was the sound of my bedroom door creaking open from down the hall outside. But this time, there was something different. It wasn't just the door opening. I could hear someone running, their footsteps echoing through the silent house. They rushed down the stairs and slammed the front door shut behind them, leaving me and my parents in disbelief. They had heard it too. It was only then that they truly believed what I had been experiencing. We tried to chase after the mysterious intruder, but by the time we reached the front door, they were long gone. It was like they vanished into thin air. It wasn't until later that we discovered the truth. We found out that the person had been hiding inside an empty container within the closet. Can you believe it? Right there in my own room, someone had been secretly living in my storage closet, watching my every move. When I was a young girl of 20, I worked as a house cleaner for a sweet old lady named Mrs. Thompson. She lived in a big old house surrounded by a beautiful property. The house had a mysterious charm to it, but there was something strange about it too. Mrs. Thompson's house had 2 acres of land covered with trees on 3 sides, and a road on the other. The house itself was ancient, made mostly of wood, and it always felt dark inside. Mrs. Thompson would often keep the blinds shut in some rooms, and I never understood why. Sometimes I would open them to let sunlight in, but she would always close them again when I wasn't looking. It made the house feel even more ancient and eerie. The floors in the house were made of creaky wood, and they would make a sound with every step you took. It felt like the house had a secret to tell, whispering through its creaks. Mrs. Thompson, or Mrs. T as I called her, was around 70 years old. She couldn't do certain physical tasks anymore. So my job was to help her with sweeping, dusting, cleaning dishes, doing laundry, and sorting mail. One weekend, Mrs. T asked me if I could stay overnight at her house. She had 4 bedrooms, even though she lived alone, so it wasn't a problem. The events I'm about to share happened on a Friday and technically spilled over into Saturday. As I arrived at the house on that Friday, I greeted Mrs. T with few words and dropped my backpack full of clothes and cosmetics on the bed in the bedroom I was going to sleep in. When I turned to leave the room, there she stood, at the doorway, with her creepy presence. She didn't say hello, which was a bit strange, but she instructed me to clean the bedroom right away. After that, she simply told me to straighten up the whole house, and then she disappeared upstairs. I didn't see her for the rest of the day, but I could occasionally hear her walking around in her bedroom upstairs. It puzzled me. What was she doing up there? There were no TVs in the house, so I couldn't figure out what she could be up to. One thing that struck me as odd was how protective she was of her basement. She made it clear that it was completely off limits, and she didn't want me going down there. Nighttime fell, and I went to bed early. This was before smartphones existed, so I didn't even know what time it was. Maybe around 9 or 10 o'clock. The bed I slept on was the most uncomfortable one I had ever experienced, and it made falling asleep quite challenging. Hours later, I started hearing footsteps outside my room. They were slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing back and forth. At first, I thought it might be Mrs. T going to the bathroom, but the footsteps stopped outside my door, and that's when things started to feel eerie. I sat up and listened intently. The creaking of the wooden floor told me that Mrs. T was standing right there, outside my room. It sent shivers down my spine. She finally walked away, and I could hear her going down the stairs. A door opened and closed downstairs, and I had a gut feeling that it was the basement door. Some time passed, and then I heard the door open and close again. Heavy, slow footsteps made their way up the creaky stairs. The footsteps approached my door and stopped. I sat up again, heart pounding, as I listened to the creaks of pressure on the floor outside my room. Then I heard the doorknob start to turn. I quickly laid back down, pretending to be asleep, and pulled the sheets over me. Mrs. T entered the room, took a few steps, paused, and then left. She went back to her room, shutting the door behind her. I was disturbed by her strange behavior. After waiting for about half an hour, curiosity got the better of me. I had to see what was in that basement. I got out of the creaky bed, tiptoed to the door, and made my way down the stairs as quietly as I could. I was determined to uncover the secret Mrs. T was hiding. I reached the heavy basement door, turned on the lights, and descended the stairs, step by step. As I reached the bottom, my heart nearly stopped. 2 old wooden chairs stood in the center of the basement, and to my horror, there were 2 decaying corpses sitting in them, adorned with wigs. The sight made me want to scream, and I had to fight the urge to vomit. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. With trembling legs, I mustered the courage to walk deeper into the basement, closer to the corpses. I had to make sure they were real. Both corpses wore men's wigs, and the bigger one even had a beret on. They must have been there for nearly a year, judging by their decayed state. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the macabre sight before me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from upstairs, from the first floor. I froze. I couldn't make it to the light switch in time. Fear gripped me as I hid behind one of the couches in the basement. I covered my mouth with my hands, praying that Mrs. T wouldn't find me. The footsteps grew closer, slow and heavy, descending one creepy step at a time. I held my breath, sweat trickling down my forehead, and then I heard it. Mrs. T whispered my name, barely audible, but chilling nonetheless. I peeked around the couch and saw her halfway across the basement, clutching a big kitchen knife in her hand. I knew I had to run. I knew I was faster than her. I dashed towards the stairs, fueled by adrenaline, and Mrs. T screamed my name, her voice filled with fury. She chased after me, but I managed to reach the first floor and sprinted upstairs to the bedroom where I had left my backpack. I grabbed it in haste and rushed back downstairs. Mrs. T was at the top of the basement steps, her eyes filled with madness. I fled out of the front door, got into my car, and turned on the engine. I glanced back at the big old house, and there she stood, Mrs. T, watching me leave. Within 10 minutes, I was safely back home. I had never given Mrs. T any personal information, such as my address or phone number, so she couldn't contact me again. Looking back, I couldn't help but wonder. One of those corpses must have been her dead husband, the one she had mentioned a couple of times. As for the other smaller corpse, I had no idea who it was, but it was a chilling and disturbing scene that I would never forget. Something was definitely off about Mrs. T and her house. When my mischievous friends and I were just 13 years old, we used to embark on daring adventures. One of our favorite pastimes was the Saturday night ding-dong ditch sessions. It was a time when our neighborhood was filled with excitement and secrets. Let me introduce you to my friends. There was Jack, a fearless and quick-witted fellow, always ready for an adventure. Then there was Lily, a clever and resourceful girl who could find the best hiding spots. And of course, there was me, Oliver, a curious and slightly mischievous kid. Our neighborhood was like a picture-perfect scene from a storybook, with rows of cozy houses surrounded by patches of enchanting woods. But back then, there were fewer houses and more trees, adding an air of mystery to our escapades. Our gang had devised a secret plan to explore the daring unknown. We gave ourselves code names. Jack was Thunderbolt, Lily was Shadow, and I became Whisper. The world outside was our playground, and we were ready to seize the night. As the moon rose high in the sky, we set out on our adventure. With giggles and hushed whispers, we roamed the streets, searching for houses to surprise. Jack and Lily took charge, fearlessly approaching the doors, while I scouted for the perfect hiding spots. We began with innocent mischief, ringing doorbells and dashing away, finding great delight in the reactions of the unsuspecting homeowners. Each house brought a new thrill, a new story to tell. The men who answered the doors had similar reactions, stepping outside to investigate and shouting in frustration. But it only fueled our mischievous spirits. One memorable night, we stumbled upon a street with houses surrounded by mysterious woods. The atmosphere was different, tinged with a touch of eerie excitement. We gazed at each other, eyes shining with curiosity. This street beckoned us like a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. The first house on this peculiar street had an air of mystery about it. Tall grass danced in the wind. An old, worn-out car with a tattered cover sat in the driveway, and the house itself looked worn and abandoned. We exchanged mischievous grins, sensing an adventure of epic proportions. Jack, in his audacity, volunteered to ring the doorbell. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, he barely made it across the street before the door creaked open. To our surprise, a towering figure emerged. A man with a stocky build and a furious expression unlike any we had encountered before. The man roared with anger, his voice echoing through the night. He stomped around his yard, his eyes scanning the bushes as if searching for hidden enemies. We couldn't help but laugh at his dramatic reaction, as we had done with the others before. But this time, the situation took an unexpected turn. The man's fury didn't dissipate. He continued his search, as if determined to catch the culprits who disturbed his peace. Fear gnawed at our hearts, and we exchanged worried glances. In a desperate attempt to escape the man's wrath, we scattered like leaves in the wind. Jack, with his lightning reflexes, found cover in the shadows, while Lily and I sought refuge behind a gnarled oak tree near the patch of woods. Time seemed to stretch, each second pregnant with anxiety. The man's gaze lingered in our direction, and our hearts pounded like drums in our chests. Would he discover our hiding place? The fear froze us in place, unable to move or make a sound. Finally, the man retreated into his house, leaving us in a state of trembling relief. But little did we know, our ordeal was far from over. Jack, filled with both bravery and curiosity, couldn't resist ringing the doorbell one more time. Our hearts sank as the door swung open, revealing the man holding a rifle in his hands. In unison, we gasped, our eyes wide with terror. We knew we had gone too far. Fear paralyzed us as the man conducted a thorough search, inspecting every nook and cranny, including the spaces behind his car and the sheltered spots behind the trees. We were like trapped birds, helpless and vulnerable. Then, to our astonishment, the man's gaze locked onto us. Panic seized our young hearts as we crouched even lower, praying that he wouldn't spot us. The man's unblinking stare bore into our souls, freezing us in place. We were at his mercy, waiting for his next move. But as if by some miraculous intervention, the man turned away and disappeared from view. We held our breath, afraid to move, afraid to believe that we had escaped his wrath. It was a moment of sheer relief and disbelief. Without wasting a second, we sprinted towards Jack, who had been keeping a lookout across the street. We ran through the dimly lit neighborhood, our hearts pounding like thunder in our chests. The fear propelled us forward, blocks blurring into a whirlwind of chaos and adrenaline. Finally, we reached a safe haven, collapsing on the sidewalk, gasping for breath. Jack explained that he had yelled, warning us of the man's approach. It was a close call, a moment that would forever be etched in our memories. We decided not to report what had happened, as the fear and guilt overwhelmed us. Instead, we shared our thrilling tale with a select few friends, keeping it a secret from the grown-ups. We were grateful that the mysterious house was situated far from our usual haunts, sparing us from encountering the rifle-wielding man again. There were two best friends named Lily and Emily. They were both 15 years old, but the story I'm about to tell you happened when they were just 12. Lily and Emily loved spending time together, especially during weekends and free moments. They shared a deep fascination with ghosts and all things paranormal. In fact, they believed that every house they entered was haunted. They often went on ghost hunts, just like the ones they saw on TV, armed with a flip phone to record eerie sounds. They were determined to capture evidence of the supernatural. One night, around midnight, Lily and Emily were wide awake and full of energy, like most kids their age on the weekends. They hatched a plan to conduct a ghost hunt in Lily's house. Excitement bubbled within them as they prepared their trusty flip phone recorder and borrowed Lily's dad's touchscreen phone to capture videos. This was a big deal for them because they dreamed of becoming professional ghost hunters someday. Lily's basement was unlike most basements. You see, the house she lived in was very old-fashioned, making the basement quite unique. When they went down the stairs, they entered a large room filled with storage items. A little further, there was a medium-sized room that housed the washer and dryer. But the farthest room was the smallest, almost like a tiny cell. They had never set foot in that room because it gave them the creeps. It felt too eerie for them to explore. With nerves tingling and hearts racing, Lily and Emily descended the stairs. They switched on the flip phone's camera and began their ghost hunt. Mimicking the TV shows they adored, they asked the typical questions, "Is there anybody here?" and "Give me a sign if you're here." They hoped for a response, a supernatural encounter that would validate their belief in ghosts. After a while, they grew tired of asking questions and decided to head back upstairs to Lily's room. They couldn't wait to review their first video recording. It was a pivotal moment for them, a step closer to their dream of becoming professional ghost hunters. Excitement filled the air as they sat down to watch the video. However, their excitement soon turned into disappointment. The video and audio recordings didn't reveal anything out of the ordinary. Usually, when they found nothing, they would make something up, like a ghostly footstep to ease their disappointment. But this time, they were too excited about the video to pretend. Disheartened, they couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Sleep eluded them that night. Instead, they decided to play a few board games to distract themselves. But as the night wore on, curiosity got the better of them. They agreed to review the video once more, convinced they might have missed something important. As they watched the video again, a strange feeling washed over them. It was as if a dark energy emanated from the recording. They realized they had been too caught up in their excitement during their first viewing to notice this ominous aura. As they paid closer attention, they could hear faint footsteps, ones that weren't their own. They couldn't believe their ears. The audio didn't match what they remembered from their time in the basement. Then, they saw it. Lily's heart skipped a beat, and Emily gasped. In the footage, behind Emily, a figure appeared. A distorted, almost human-like shape with bright white eyes. It seemed to peer through the screen, as if watching them from within the video itself. It sent shivers down their spines, and they quickly shut off the recording. Both girls were in complete shock. They couldn't bring themselves to tell Lily's father, who was fast asleep in the early morning hours. Instead, they made a pact to keep it their secret, burying it deep within their hearts. They vowed never to venture into that basement again. Years passed, but Lily and Emily continued to discuss that chilling night. Sometimes it even invaded their dreams, lingering as a haunting memory. They often wondered if it was their imagination, or if something truly otherworldly had been with them in that basement. One thing was for sure, they would never gather the courage to step foot in there again. When I was a freshman in college, something strange and mysterious happened to me. One day, during study hall, I found myself in the library, working on some computer science assignments. You see, my laptop at home didn't have the software I needed, so I had to use one of the computers in the library. There was another student from my class who sat next to me because those two computers were the only ones with the required program. This boy was quite unusual. He was really tall and had very pale skin. His long black hair covered one of his eyes, giving him a mysterious look. He always wore an anti-flag t-shirt, ripped jeans, and Doc Martens. He never spoke to anyone in class, and I had never seen him with any friends. He seemed to keep to himself. As I took my seat, the boy looked up at me, and his gaze felt as if I had committed a terrible crime. It made me feel uneasy, so I quickly looked away, pretending to search through my bag for something. While my head was down, I heard him chuckle and mumble something under his breath. I assumed he was frustrated with his coding, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I sat back up and hastily typed in my login details, trying to break the awkwardness that lingered in the air. As a distraction, I blurted out, "She assigns too much homework. I can barely keep up." My eyes were fixed on the computer screen, avoiding any direct contact with him. And then, he surprised me with his response, "You want the answers, don't you?" I hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by his straightforwardness. Usually I would have said yes, eager to get some help. But something about his piercing stare and eerie presence made me change my mind. I mustered the courage and replied, "No, thanks. I won't learn anything that way." I didn't want to experience that intense gaze again. It felt as if he was peering deep into my soul. With that creepy laugh still echoing in my ears, I closed my eyes and cringed. When I opened them again, he was gone, vanished into thin air. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried my best to shrug it off and focus on my work. However, the strange part came after he left. He had forgotten his flash drive. I waited for about 10 minutes, hoping he would return to retrieve it, but he never did. Study hall was about to end at 1 o'clock, and it was already 12:50. I made a decision. I would take it and give it back to him the next day in computer science class. I tossed the flash drive into a little box above my bed. I couldn't deny it. It was an awesome flash drive. It had a Swiss Army knife design, with the flash drive nestled in the middle. Little did I know that this flash drive held secrets that would unravel a strange series of events. The boy never showed up at school again. At first, it didn't raise any eyebrows, since he was known for being absent frequently. A month went by, and everyone seemed to have forgotten about him. We were all busy preparing for our upcoming graduation in May. It wasn't until 2 days ago, when I returned home from college, that I remembered the forgotten flash drive. I needed a flash drive for a presentation, and there it was, sitting in that little box. I scanned it with my Norton antivirus, and it came out clean. My initial plan was to delete everything on it and use it for my business class presentation. But curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't resist snooping through his files. The first folder I opened was named Computer Science. To my surprise, I found all the answers to every assignment neatly organized inside. It struck me that maybe he had left it behind intentionally so I could copy off of him, knowing he would never return. Compelled to dig deeper, I ventured into the second folder, labeled Music. I was curious to know what kind of music this mysterious boy listened to. To my surprise, there were only 3 songs: Take Me to the River by Al Green, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, and Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. Quite an unexpected mix, I must say. But there was more. I clicked back again, and there it was, an untitled folder. Without hesitation, I opened it. To my astonishment, it contained files related to AP literature. Essays, snippets of stories, and various random texts were scattered within. Yet one particular document caught my attention. It was titled, The Best Doc. With trembling hands, I clicked on it, and what I saw left me bewildered. It was a 10-page document filled with notebook pages. But there was only one thing written on every single page: the boy's first and last name, repeatedly and meticulously handwritten. It seemed like an obsession, or perhaps an act of self-affirmation. Still, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I clicked back again, and that's when things took a strange turn. There were pictures. Pictures that sent chills down my spine. Emergency escape plan posters from every classroom in the school. a picture of a lit cigarette on the bathroom floor. Another one showing a handful of coins scattered on the same bathroom floor, with a yellow post-it note beside them, bearing the words "chump change" in all capital letters. And then, the most unsettling discovery, a picture of me. I was sitting against a classroom wall, engrossed in a book. It was from my English class, a class he wasn't even a part of. I stared at the image, frozen in disbelief and fear. To make matters even more perplexing, there was a document titled "Rest in Peace." My heart raced as I opened it, hoping for some explanation. But to my dismay, it was empty. Nothing but a blank page. I couldn't comprehend if it was all some twisted joke or if there was something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. I was left with no answers, only a sense of unease and confusion. As I sit here, pondering over the events that unfolded, I still have no idea why that boy vanished from school and left behind his hard drive filled with enigmatic files. The secrets it held, the unanswered questions, continue to haunt me. Maybe one day I will uncover the truth behind his mysterious disappearance.